Howdy, folks. I'm Rebecca Jolly, the Jolly Alchemist, with another rambling story time that might have some interesting nuggets inside of it. In this one, my purpose is to talk, and it's going to go off the rails, but that's all right. It's going to be interesting. But the purpose that I have in mind is to talk about this subject of power-ups. What is a power-up? What has it been? What has it done? And how has it figured in my story, in my evolution? In the beginning, I used to call it going crazy, and it was pretty crazy. In the beginning, the first one came out of, yeah, I think it's connected to this time, and it was a very chaotic time for me when I had separated from my husband. I was living alone with two little girls. I had a boyfriend. He was what I called the ugliest man on the planet. And he was definitely a creature of some magic himself. In fact, he had the ability, it was definitely a chaotic to chaotic evil. It wasn't neutral. You know how in Dungeons and Dragons they got these certain levels of chaotic good kind of thing? Well, yeah, I'm generally more chaotic good, and he was chaotic on the other side. But he had the ability to walk down the street and pop out street lamps as he walked. And he had other abilities which he did not put to good use, but he was a magical creature in his own right. Very influential, but not in a good way, I guess you might say. And it was around this time that I had these lesbian neighbors, and they had, given me this cat. I mentioned it in the last time, right? Well, part of what was going on was I was just okay. No, back up. Let's tell a little bit more of the backstory. I really don't want to go into the cult too much yet. I will later. It's a very good story, and there's a lot of people still in this cult. In fact, it's so normalized that many people disagree it is a cult, and that's partly why I insist on calling it a cult, because now we're getting much more information out there to let people know how and why it is a cult, and the knitting cult lady, among other people, will tell you all about how and why it is a cult, so I don't need to go into that. But it just touches on the very end of it, because I was just coming out of that and realizing I don't need a God, especially a male God, to tell me what I need to do, where I need to be. When I came out of the cult, I was really looking for someone to follow. And I tried, all sorts of different ways. My last stop in the religious world was the Unitarians, and I realized even they had too much structure for me, too much organization. I could not handle one more drop of worship, of dogma. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't sing one more hymn. I couldn't listen to one more scripture. I just couldn't, no more, never again. And I still have a real knee-jerk reaction to that kind of way of trying to influence people's thought patterns. I guess you could say I'm entirely mind scrubbed, and I'm not into it anymore. Not into worship. Not worshiping others, not being worshipped, okay? I really, really need to be just a regular figure. So when I discovered that no church would do for me, none at all, then I was on my own, and I went into a phase of studying parenting. The internet was brand new then, at least it was for me, as a poor single mother. This was probably, I'd say, 2001-ish for me. Well, anyway, all these weird things have been going on. I was just in the process of discovering that divinity is not something that needs to be looked for on the outside of us. We're all divine. We're all pieces of this earth. We all have whatever is divine in us. And even the cult taught that, actually, to an extent, because they said, if you do what you're supposed to, you'll get your very own planet, and then you'll be able to be a god too. Oh, let's suffer this whole long life in order to be able to have this dream of the future. Well, plenty of people have sold religion on that dream, so it's not unusual that way. But I was really in a time of deep diving into the meat of that. Like, okay, if I'm not going to be a cult member, what am I going to be? What am I going to believe in? What am I going to do? And one of the only things that I really knew I wanted to do was to be a good mother. I've also spoken about this in the transits and how that wasn't in the cards for me. It wasn't in my circuitry. It was me trying to live the other side of a channel that I just don't have the whole channel of. What I'm here to do is explore values, what's right and what's wrong. And believe me, I have explored values, especially doing what's wrong. And I will talk more about my history, or herstory, if you will, of deep explorations into right and wrong and values. But that's not today's talk. Today is going crazy, or power-ups, yeah, as they came to be known. But it's, I really do have to tell about the first time I went crazy. It wasn't fun. It was very chaotic. I thought I was going to die. I was actually in the hospital, and I had a Catholic priest give me last rites. I was that convinced I was going to die. And actually, I went to sleep fully believing I would not wake up. And then when I woke up, I was a little bit pissed off. First of all, I was in the funny farm, so... But I was like, shit, man. I figured it out, and now I have to go back and actually live? Oh, shit. Oh, goodness. But it really, I guess, started because of the lesbians. That's... Lord love them. Bless their tiny little hearts. They were ostensibly my friends. And I think that was the problem, because I was really naive enough to believe them. And I went over to them. I was talking with them about what was going on in my life, all this crazy shit that's happening. And the husband one, again, she said, well, you know, I worked in a mental institute. Really, nobody calls it the funny farm but me, but it's pretty funny. So, and I had never been there. She said, you know, your boyfriend is accusing you of being crazy. He's trying to get you committed. He's, what he had done, tricksy little fucker. He had stolen my address book, my childhood address book, actually, which had the names and contact information of every friend and relative I ever had. And he started going around calling all these people and saying, Rebecca's lost it. She thinks she's Jesus Christ. She's crazy. She needs to be committed. And I was looking for, like, some sympathy, some help, some female support. I thought the lesbians were, you know, open-minded, progressive type individuals. And the husband one said to me, really, the only cure that I can see for this situation is to volunteer to go to the funny farm yourself. Go in, be tested. They'll find out, of course, that nothing's wrong with you. You're perfectly sane. Oh, excuse me, I have to sneeze. Oh, maybe not. You'll be fine, and then you can come out with a clean bill of health, and he won't be able to commit you anymore because you have already been there and on your own will and proven that you're not crazy. And I didn't know any better, having not been there. Now that I've been there, of course, I know. Oh, just a sec, I've got to... maybe I don't. Now that I've been there, of course, I know that nobody goes to the funny farm without coming out with a diagnosis. Yay! And my diagnosis was bipolar. Of course, I figured a way out of that one. Took years. But, getting ahead of myself. At this part of the story, I just didn't know any better. So I called the funny farm myself. They came and got me. One of the things that I remember most about that is they said, "Do you have any weapons?" And I said, "Yeah, always." And they were like, "Ah, crazy lady." And I thought, don't you always have a weapon? Don't Are any of us completely weaponless? Now, your weapon might not be good enough for your situation, but you've always got some kind of a weapon. Anyway, they didn't like that answer. I went to the funny farm where they told me that only the people who are really smart come in with your diagnosis. Oh, that makes me feel so much better about being here. Ay, ay, ay. And that was my first experience with the process and discovering that the people who work in funny farms are oftentimes crazier than the people who visit the funny farms. So it was a whole fascinating experience. And of course, I'm a channel 3313, The Witness. So as soon as I got into the funny farm, I was actually having a really good time because I was running around talking to all the people going, "What's your brand of crazy? What do you got going on? What's your story?" And they would tell me their story in whatever ways they could. I remember there was this one woman who was nonverbal. She didn't speak. And I didn't need to speak. I just wanted to witness. So I sat next to her, and she had a piece of paper and a pencil, and she drew for me a clock face. And she started basically channeling for me. She started writing around the clock face, and she would, like say, start at 8 o'clock, then she would write something at 2 o'clock, and then she would write something at 10 o'clock, and then something at 6 o'clock, and then something. She was writing it out of order, but she had figured out this trick to make the things that she was saying out of order make sense by putting it on the clock face. And she basically read my future. And I don't have the piece of paper anymore. But I definitely got something very deep out of that experience of having this crazy woman read my life for me. And I have to say, real briefly, since we're on the subject of crazy, we're all crazy. It's just a matter of what kind of crazy are you? Do you understand what kind of crazy you are in comparison with other people? And the point that's most interesting for me is, can you laugh about it? Or in the case of people who think that I'm a dangerous kind of crazy, can you explain it so that people who see you acting crazy can eventually, if they will sit and listen to you, get to some place where they go, "Oh, okay." In some ways, I think that my decade, it's been over a decade now, but more or less a decade with my current partner has been about having enough time to tell someone enough of the story that when I start to act crazy, they understand that there's a method behind the madness. It's not just completely random and quite possibly dangerous crazy. It's crazy that needs to be contextualized, it needs to be understood, perhaps reined in some way, or minded. I've come to use the analogy of a dog off of a leash. I am, as a manifesting generator, a dog. And the world very much wants my kind of dog to be on a leash. And the times that I've gone crazy, or the times that I now call power-ups, are really about times when the dog was off the leash. And unfortunately, the dog was off the leash with a lot of strange and crazy type of magical abilities. So over the course of my power-ups, and I've had, I don't know, counting is pointless at this stage, but I would say roughly a dozen or so. I've had abilities like being able to see the future, living in multiple time streams at the same time, being able to tell other people the future, being able to talk my way out of situations that would have sent other people definitely to the jail, the hospital, or the funny farm. And of course, I did learn myself the hard way that those are the three places that I end up. I'll go to jail, I'll go to the hospital, or I'll go to the funny farm. And these are all places where when people are acting outside of the acceptable normal range, they end up. Is what's wrong with you a medical issue? Let's send you to the hospital. Is it a legal issue? You go to jail. Is it a crazy issue? Whoop, off to the funny farm you go. But I've had animals communicate with me. A very powerful story with horses that I will tell at one point. But all these weird things are happening. I'm bringing together all these things. I learned how to channel on a power-up. Yeah, playing with traffic. That's been fun. But back to the beginning, where I can actually start to make sense of this thing, and the stories of the strange and bizarre things that have happened to me, or the strange things that I've witnessed and been able to do. Okay, that'll come. But what this is about now is not just telling these stories for the sake of saying, oh, look how crazy I've been, but it's to put it into context, because I realize now that what's been happening in these times when I've been crazy or powered up is that the universe has been teaching me lessons I needed to learn, and my own education in these things was so spotty that it needed to teach me lessons in a very, like, at the same time, very basic and very advanced. So there's all these mumble jumble of things, and I think a lot of people never really get their way out of that box. Probably because they don't know how to explain it, or they don't have the ability, they don't have the definition, they don't have the proper metaphor to be able to understand it and then explain it. And that's part of what I really love about human design, is that it's given me a metaphor within which to understand myself and give some logical underpinnings to the size of the crazy. Really, these power-ups have cost me my family, to the extent that leaving the cult didn't already. I mean, I'm not the only one to leave the cult, that's for sure, not even in my family. My parents raised 6 children, and as far as I know, none of them are actual Mormons anymore. There may be 1 or 2 that are pretending, but one is so full of rage, maybe she needs a cult. And the other one is also full of rage, but she's just, in my way of looking at it, so broken. She uses the cult as an excuse to get support, I think, from the family. Otherwise, she wouldn't have any at all. But that's another story. Me and my power-ups. In the funny farm. Yeah, but the first power-up that I had was so chaotic that I had no words to explain it, no way to understand it. In fact, I didn't really start to be able to put together the pieces of what was happening to me until I had had 3 or 4. So there was a lot of chaos. There was a lot of the funny farm. There was jail and the hospital over and over again as they tried to figure out what is wrong with this woman. And I myself was also trying to figure that out. And now I've got the experience to be able to look back on it and give some sort of explanation to it. And the explanation that I have is that I needed to be taught how to exist on a higher plane, how to be myself. It's like we all have, and there is some scientific basis for what I'm about to get into, this whole thing about lives between lives, or what happens when we die, and is reincarnation a thing? In my metaphor, yes is the answer. So then the question becomes, okay, what happens between our lives? All right, there's books about this. There's people who've written about it, very, well-recognized scientists and scholars starting to write about this subject now, so maybe to some of you seeming like I'm talking about craziness now, but if you get into studying it, you can totally see for yourself now that this is not an area that's any longer necessarily seen as crazy. But what I got out of it when I researched it was that there are different stages of development that happen to us in between our lives. And the people who talk about having had multiple lives definitely talk about identifiable stages. The one that I'm remembering, the book, it talks about 10 stages. Okay, fine. Well, one of them is the stage where you sit down and plan out, okay, that was a fun ride. It was so exciting and so fun in whatever ways. I want to do it again. Let's plan what the future life will be. And I always kind of imagine some sort of a science fiction thing where you go in one of my favorite series, and they made it into a movie too, is Firefly, Serenity. And there's this scene in there where they talk to, what is it? The shit, I forgot the name of the guy, but he's a tech geek. They go in and his room is just plastered with all these screens, yeah? And he's sitting in front of all these screens. And I imagine it being like that, like sitting in the middle and all the way around you, you're in a complete entire globe of screens showing different possibilities and what's interesting to you. You have a group of characters that you reincarnate with on a regular basis, your fractal family, as they call it in human design. And which one would you like to do next? What's the size and shape of your next carnival ride? And then you pick, the parents that'll get you to the place you want to be, and the circumstances and the people, and yeah, I want to meet you along the way, but how will I recognize you? Let's set up some signs by which I will recognize you, and you'll recognize me, and we'll find each other, and then we'll go on these adventures together. And the same thing, it's kind of like my daughter and I meeting an arc and having adventures. It's like, oh yeah, let's plan, let's meet up, and let's do this other virtual thing together. Oh yeah, we can go here and we can breed all these dinosaurs together. Yeah, let's do that. Let's make babies. Like that. And in that way of looking at it, I can definitely see that as difficult as my childhood was, I absolutely picked it. I absolutely picked those people that now, of course, really want nothing to do with me, but that's fine. They don't need to. They've got their own lives. They've got their own belief system into which I definitely do not fit as anything more than just a black sheep, one of the lost ones. And if anything, my parents think that I want to get close to them because I want their money or something. I don't know. But anyway, they're not having anything to do with me, and that's fine. Do you? But let's see, where was I? Power-ups, understanding, yeah. So part of what needed to happen was that I was real smart in certain areas and then real dumb in certain areas. So then the universe, as it's dealing with me and trying to teach me how to be my true self or how to live up to my potential, is one way to look at it. Because my potential is so much bigger than anything this left brain society can actually put a hold on. And of course, I know within the human design analogy, as a manifesting generator, I actually have the potential to be something that no other kind can. A lot of us, when we discover that we're generators, and that's of course approximately 70% of us, we think, oh, okay, I'm not really one of the super special ones. And I admit to being a little bit disappointed when I discovered that I was a manifesting generator. I was like, oh, 35%. It's not that special. There's a lot of us out there. There are a lot of us out there, but it took years of studying for me to realize the true potential of what's going on with manifesting generators. Everybody's special. Okay, let's say that first. But I believe there is a potential within manifesting generators that is not within the other types. And since we're in this, and since it's relevant and it's a human design thing, let me explain this bit of it. So Human design was first received as a system of information by this dude who calls himself Ra. Okay, fine. Sun god, whatever, abbreviation of his a name by his initials, however the name came about, whatever. We'll call him what he wanted to be called. He was a manifester. Oh, that sounds big and important, doesn't it? And special. They're only 10% of the population. They're so powerful, they can do whatever they want. You know, but somehow they don't really, in this day and age, end up doing all that much. Of course, they are powerful people, but they are limited by the fact that they don't have sacral energy, so they don't actually have the physical power to do all that much by themselves. Their power resides in how many people they can hook onto their train and get to follow their way of thinking and do the actual physical work for them. So they're the idea generators. They're the people. I use the analogy of a play with this. They're the ones who are the producers who say, hey, kids, let's make a movie about ancient Egypt. And all the generators say, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's have a play about ancient Egypt. And they get together. And it's the generators who build the sets and make the costumes and have, do all the lighting, all the work. And then in this analogy, we have, of course, the coordinators who are the directors of the play. They're in charge of what's actually happening on a day-to-day basis. And then we have our observers that are the critics of the play, looking at the whole entire play. How is it going? Is it a good play? What's happening? So that's kind of how I explained the types. So within that explanation, and as far as it goes, when we're talking about the power to change the world, historically speaking, the manifestors were the most powerful beings because they do have a lot of power, energy, forcefulness. Other people just naturally tend to follow along behind them. I met a manifestor in the Funny Farm. And a lot of people, when they land in the Funny Farm, they land in the Funny Farm, and it takes them weeks or months to escape. But I watched a manifestor pass through in probably under 2 days, and it was just her energy, just her power. She would just go up to people and say, yeah, you're getting me out of here. You're doing this. You're giving me all this stuff along the way. This is going to be happening. This is going to be happening. And the people at the Funny Farm, even though that's not their way, they couldn't help themselves. They energetically reacted to that. They fell in line with it, and they got her ass out of there where she wanted to go. That's kind of how manifestors move through the world. I wouldn't say it's an easy life, because I've seen manifestors over and over again surviving situations that are typically deemed to be unsurvivable. I'm just starting to read a book about Shackleton and his adventures, and I just feel a lot of manifestor energy coming out of that Shackleton guy. I don't know when he was born. Maybe I'll find out and look it up, but I'll let you know. So they're powerful beings, but not necessarily by themselves. They don't have enough sacral energy to go out and make so much trouble anymore. Ra calls them says that they're retired. They're out of work. They don't have a job anymore because their job is, building empires. And this is not the age of empires anymore. So, okay, so that's them. They're powerful, but then their power is sort of self-limited. They, if you look around, they definitely are still, building empires to the best of their ability, but they're 10% of the population. There's a lot of them out there. A lot of them are no longer building empires. So they're doing other things. I call it just a solo mission. They're on something. They're meant to do something, but they need to decide what it is, and then they need to find their supporters to get the work done. Okay, fine. That's manifestors. Then we have coordinators. Everybody knows that reflectors aren't doing anything. Of course, that's not true. We do have actually some very famous reflectors. My current favorite is Josh Johnson. He's becoming powerful and influential, doing exactly what he's meant to be doing, which is looking at the larger patterns of society and talking to people about it. I think being a stand-up comedian or a public figure of that sort is perfect for reflectors. That is exactly what reflectors are meant to be doing. And I give all props and applauds to Josh for finding his perfect niche, and I hope he stays there because that is where he will be able to have the most power and influence considering his design. But so they're not really in a go to work every day kind of thing influential that way. They're not meant to be. They're meant to sit up on top and look out and get the larger view. So okay, fine. But having the larger view isn't necessarily pushing things in any direction. Reflectors don't need to push anything. They just want to watch things and talk about them. So okay, good. Then we have coordinators. Coordinators are very powerful people because they're so it's interesting. They're not magnetic, but they feel magnetic. They're so enticing. They're so um everybody wants a projector, especially a not self projector, because a not self projector is the perfect slave. Yeah. If a generator not being their true self is a slave, and we are the slaves, the projector is the super slave because they're trying their best to be a generator. Everybody who's not a generator is trying to be a generator, and every generator is trying to be a manifester. That's the irony of the way that works. So, but that's not the way it's supposed to be for projectors. Projectors are supposed to be leaders. They're supposed to be guiding their immediate surroundings, their subgroup, so to speak. So telling them what to do because they have the ability to see inside of us as generators, see what our strengths are, our weaknesses, where we should be, what we should be doing. And I have a daughter who's a projector, and when she found out she was a projector, she was like vindicated. She said, I knew it. I knew it all the time. I knew where you were supposed to be going. I knew what you were supposed to be doing, and I tried to tell you bitches, but you never ever listened to me. You never took me seriously. I was like, okay, all right, okay. Geez, I'll be a good generator now. I'll listen to you more. I'll follow your advice. This particular one doesn't want to give me advice anymore. I'm not worth knowing to her. So, okay, fine. Age-appropriate behavior. All good things and all good time. We're letting that one simmer for a while. Luckily for me, she won't watch my videos, so it doesn't matter what I say. Oh, goodness. But they are supposed to be leading and guiding us. They're the directors of this play if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. Now, how often are they doing what they're supposed to be doing? But my point is that they often get derailed, and often how they get derailed is they get attached to somebody else, usually a generator who uses them as their super slave. I have a friend who's very much in this situation, and on one hand, he's wanting to get out of it, but on the other hand, he can't. I think projectors have a really, really hard time with that, and I think part of the reason they have such a hard time is because in order to get right, they're usually forced to reorganize their entire lives. And who wants to do that? Who wants to say goodbye to everyone you know and gather together around yourself a whole new group of people? It's just really too much to ask of most people, and projectors are, they have a real hard time with that. So then what happens to them is they're powerful beings that tend to get tied down in a situation so that their powers are greatly limited. So then we find our projector people who should be our leaders not being our leaders. So okay, so then it's down to the generators. Well, straight generators, I don't know how we would live without them. These are the people that go to work every day. So these are the truly essential personnel as far as getting anything done. These are the people that actually work in the service organizations, and can work in the service organizations. These are the people that can do things that serve others, of course, uh, in their not self workings, it's slavery. Um, and Ra was all about talking about wanting to release the slaves and free the slaves. I also want to free the slaves. But we have to be careful about how we do it. Whenever I go up to a generator or somebody who is doing wage slavery and I say that to them, they don't really like being told that. They don't like really looking at their lives in terms of slavery. But of course, there are more and more of us who are discovering that working at a fast food restaurant is really nobody's dream. So everyone who works in a fast food restaurant on some level or other, and there may be the rare exception, I have myself had a fast food restaurant job that was the saving of me one summer. So I can't say that everyone who works in a fast food restaurant is a loser. And of course, they're not losers. They're just doing things that they don't really want to do. How many people are working in a fast food restaurant because that's their end goal? That's what they really wanted to be. That was their dream. Few to none, I would say. So we love them when we want a hamburger, but it's not really a sustainable system. Really. And I think, and I hope that systems like that will naturally fall away as we find places where we can do what we truly want to do as generators. So anyway, generators have this capacity to just do a day's work in a day's time over and over again for many hundreds of years. I happen to think that probably our most long-lived people on the planet are generators because of this just endless capacity that they have to just go, to be steady. Whereas manifesting generators, what I'm finally working around to here, my type, we have that capacity to work on a daily basis, but it has to be very specially focused. And that's why we're called specialists in the 64 keys system. Because we're generators that have to be very carefully placed. We have to have the right kind of thing to be able to do, to be able to have the right energy. Otherwise, we'll burn out. I know I've burned out, but trying to be something that I'm not. So in trying to be more of what I am, I find myself having more and more energy. So there's that. And, if you're looking for justifications for human design, that's a good one because all of us are really concerned on some level with energy. Why am I so tired? Why are so many of us so exhausted and yet forced into these situations where we still have to get up to an alarm clock every day and go to work? So anyway, please focus. Yes. Manifesting generators have manifestor energy, but it must be properly used. They must remember that first they are generators, and they must work within a generator frame rather than a manifestor frame. It's working within a manifestor frame that makes us chaos bunnies. And I absolutely am guilty of spewing chaos into the world as a chaos bunny, trying to be a manifestor rather than recognizing and accepting and working within my basic generator nature. But the point is that the manifesting generators are in a unique position to have more than their daily power. If you put a manifesting generator and a generator head to head in the short run, the manifesting generator will outperform the generator. They will come in and with less obvious work be able to accomplish more because it looks like they're so much more busy. But at the end of the project or at the end of the year, you will actually see that it's just as likely for the generator to outperform the manifesting generator because the manifesting generator skips steps and then they're forced to go back and catch them up again. So it's a tortoise and a hare kind of energy. We have the tortoise going ba 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 every day and it seems boring. But they're actually just as likely, or I would say even more likely, to succeed because they're not trying to race ahead. Racing ahead gets us all jacked up, and we got to go back and start over and give up rather than actually commit to the process. And so that manifesting generator will be the one that gets frustrated faster and quits, leaving the employer with the generator, which they did not appreciate in the first place, but now they're stuck with, and they go, oh, well, they are actually the only ones actually getting the job done. So there you go. But the power of a manifesting generator properly used is to have an incredible amount of force because of that manifesting, which happens as a result of having an actual electrical connection between a motor and the throat, and generator energy, which is a packet of energy every day to be put to the things that we really, really want to do. That is a powerful and dangerous combination if it's not used right. I speak from experience. And if it's used properly, which we definitely have seen, we have some examples of manifesting generators who have done things correctly, but, looking through the lists of 64 keys, they have, I think, over 5,000 entries in their VIP list, and anyone can go see that, by the way. If you sort it by type and you look at the lists of who have the famous historical people been by type, you see that all the baddest, scariest ones were manifesting generators. And that's my point. When it comes to coaching and helping people, the human design community always says, go to your type. Manifestors should go to manifestors, generators should go to generators, coordinators should go to coordinators. So, okay, that puts me in a special position to have influence over manifesting generators. Although, of course, if you're a different type and you get something out of my information, good for you. But as far as specifically being tuned and having the specific tools, I'm best focused for manifesting generators. I have a fondness for reflectors and a weakness for projectors. I'm interested in manifestors, but I have enough experience now with manifestors to only be peripherally interested in manifestors. And manifestors aren't interested in me, so all right, we're good there then. Do you, solo mission, have at it, have fun, good luck. Those manifestors who want help can certainly find it somewhere. But that's too much chaos even for me, I would have to say, generally. I've been willing, but manifestors themselves are not willing because generally they don't want to be told. And I get that. So, okay, fine. But the point is that manifesting generators are in a special position of either being really, really bad as chaos bunnies or really, really good as world leaders. There it is. Because they have that special combination of energy for the daily grind and power to hook people in and to use the power of a manifestor on a day-to-day basis. So on one side, you see me being an artisan. I can build a necklace like this, and I have hundreds of these. This is one of my favorites, though, because of the uniqueness of every single one of these stones. And my daughters make fun of me saying, I always want these big, chunky, bam, bam kind of necklaces, but they're not wrong. I do like that style. And there are other things that I do where I, sit and very much produce in a generator type way. I've said before, I'm a fiber person. So I'm all about sheep to shawl, taking fiber all the way from the base and turning it into something cool. Of course, my problem has been that, as my partner said, I end up making expensive moth food. So I got to get over that before I can really get back into a lot of fiber stuff again. But I hope that as my life becomes more organized, I will have less of a personal relationship with moths and then be able to get more into that where I can feel like I actually am having an impact. Because as a manifesting generator, I have both the strengths and the weaknesses of both types. I want to have an impact on the world as the manifester part of a manifesting generator, and I also want to have success doing something, exactly what I want to do every day. And I'll tell you a secret. It's too early for the secret, but I just can't help myself. On some level, when you start to sit down and be who you really are and who you're really meant to be, you can begin to do whatever you want. It's just a matter of how do you get to doing whatever you want. Because really, the ultimate goal is for all of us in this sandbox game that we have called life to be able to do what we want. That's it. That's the trick. Can you get to the point where you spend your life doing what you want to do rather than doing what you think you have to do? Are you smart enough to find your way out of the rat trap of slavery of one kind or another and into true freedom? And true freedom is not necessarily being a billionaire. It's just not. It's possible to be happy being a billionaire, but I would say from what I've seen that most of the billionaires are not happy. They're just as unhappy as the rest of us. And it becomes a race for numbers at some level. And what kind of satisfaction is that? It's not in money. I'll tell you that much. It's in being able to have the things that you want the most truly. And discovering what those things are is half the battle, yeah? When you're thrown into a sandbox game, you're not really told what the end goal is. You're just able to go in and do a lot of things. So it's almost like in these games, figuring out the rules to the game is the game. And I would say that tracks pretty well with what's going on in life. Figuring out the rules to the game is the game. Once you've figured out the rules, you can get what you want. And then the true success is measured in how much time can you actually spend doing what you want to do in a life, rather than getting to the place where you have the ability one way or another to do what you want to do. Yeah. And so on some level, it's a race against the clock. Can you get smart enough fast enough that you can spend the maximum amount of time in satisfaction or success or impact or surprise, whatever the thing is that you really want? Can you do that? And I'm figuring out that I can. I'm not all the way there yet, but I'm definitely seeing more and more glimmers of this kind of success, and it's so exciting. It's so exciting, in fact, that I wanted to share the journey. We have, as far as I can see, some people who have more or less won the game, but they're not really, as far as I can tell, being figures of global importance. There are exceptions to every rule, but it seems to me like the world really needs some kind of unifying leadership that everyone can get behind. And I don't think it's going to be leadership from an old white man, right? Pretty much all of our major countries and powers now are controlled by old white men, and their time is ending. And they're trying their best, as far as I can tell, to grab a hold and to bring back the good old days of times when they had power, and women and minorities were just tools of various sorts. Okay, so last century, like, snore, we're done with it. Of course we're done with it. But because this small segment of the population still has ostensible power, we're stuck. Yeah? We're stuck between the old and the new. And of course, we're not stuck. We are moving towards the new. It's just that the old really, really doesn't want to let go. And so those of us who are ready for the new are in a position of saying, okay, well, what's the new going to look like? Who's going to lead us forward into the new? I think it definitely needs to be, ideally it would be young people, but young people don't have the experience to be able to know the whole entire scope of what's going on in the situation. So then we're looking. It can't be manifestors because their time is over, and what they're into is really more, it's solo mission. Okay, fine. So they're doing their things. Of course, they have, friends and followers and that sort of thing, but generally, they're not going to become the world powers that they have been historically. And the coordinators, I wish they would step up, but until they do, what's going to happen? I think coordinators in some ways are more for leading on a small scale than leading on a grand scale. And it would be awesome if the exact right observer had the power to become a leader, but I don't think they really have that for leadership, just so much as commenting on what they see and being this litmus paper that we need. It's not really a leadership role. I mean, it could be, and in some ways it should be, and I love the ones who are doing it. What is it? The poppy K-pop rock star reflector, and of course, as our current iteration of court jesters, which is kind of what I think our stand-up comedians are. Super important, close to the throne, so to speak, but not actually suitable for leadership positions in the entire world just by their natures. So then that leaves leadership to generators, and specifically manifesting generators. Because what we really need in some ways is somebody who can skip to the end and see the end and then go back and pick up enough lost steps in order to be able to guide everyone else to the end. Now, I'm not saying I'm that person, but I am saying that's my ultimate job to try to figure out. Can I skip both far enough ahead to see the end and not so far that I skip so many important supporting steps that I can't go back and explain it and guide other people to there? I would be satisfied if I could just guide the people who do the guiding of the planet. You know what I'm saying? And maybe that's the point of these power-ups, to make it so that I could have both the knowledge base from having learned so many things the hard way, the experience, and the ability to see forward in order to teach somebody who hasn't made so many mistakes how to be the person who stands in front and guides the planet as one whole creation, not as, the leader of America or the leader of Europe or the leader of Asia or Russia. All these different factions that we have now. The internet has made us one world, so this whole time of factionalism is actually over, but we're not to the place where we actually recognize that yet. So it's about different forms of leadership. Here's an analogy to understand it. I love this analogy. It's about the sewing machine. I'm a sewer, a seamstress. So it's something that's both world changing and completely prosaic at the same time, very down home. Kind of anybody who wants a sewing machine can have a sewing machine. It's about the invention of the sewing machine. When the world was ready for the sewing machine, it was invented in lots of places at once. And that's kind of the point that I'm getting to. The world is ready for a new kind of leadership. And so the world itself is seeding the next kinds of leaders. And so we have potential future leaders popping up everywhere all over the planet. And it's some sort of a race to see which one will be able to live long enough and be able to head in the right direction long enough and have the right background and experience and have the right education to be able to win the race to tell the whole entire world in a comprehensible way the things that actually need to be addressed in order for us all to join together as one and move in one direction for the sake and survival of all of us, because it's really coming down to a question of survival, isn't it? Can we get over our own bullshit in time to save our own lives? And there are a lot of us who are feeling now that we can't, that it's hopeless, that we've already lost the race, that we've already damaged our planet too much. And I have to say, in that range, I think that that is not the case. I've seen in permaculture the potential that if we gathered together as a species, as a whole entire of humanity, and cleaned up our dirty diapers, 5 years. Within 5 years, we could completely change the planet and make it so that it can sustain the population and have us all living in a Garden of Eden type situation. But we have to pull together. All right. So with the agreement that we could pull together, within 5 years, we can make a system that can sustain itself and produce all the food that needs to be produced without machines, without monoculture, without all this, without all the chemicals. It can be self-supporting, it can support us, and it can lead us into a future of great abundance, which is where we're headed one way or another anyway. The question is, with how much population are we headed into it? How much of us are going to be alive to witness that abundance that is coming for us? Well, I myself would really like to avert an apocalypse. That's all I'm saying. I'd like to do it the easy way. I'd like to make this journey as fun and as eventless as possible. We've had enough wars. We've had enough genocides. We've had enough killings. We've had enough death. Let's figure out, by learning from our mistakes, how to do it right enough that we can just ease ourselves into plenty and enoughness for all. Some people say that universal basic income is the way to go. I say it would be a damn good start. So, more on all this. It is at the bottom about me and my power-ups, but me and my power-ups kind of connect to everything. So I'm seeing that it's been an hour that I've been gabbing on and going off on this tangent or that, but it is to come around and explain in the end the course of my power-ups, how they've led me through certain specific mistakes that have been pivotal for me learning how to be more of who I am, to become this consciousness evolved creature that is not only evolved in itself, but able to guide and show others the path behind me. That's the important piece. So I wanted to start making videos before I'm at the end of that road, because once somebody's at the end of the road, then they have a tendency to become figures of worship. Oh, look at this person. They succeeded. They did everything. Then that person is removed from the little people, the slaves, the grind. And I really wanted to start making videos before I am that, when I'm still in the process, so that my process of becoming could be as much as possible recorded, so that when we look back at the figure that I am planning to be, which is definitely impactful and definitely satisfying, we can say, okay, how did something so crazy and so broken end up to be something so powerful and so successful? That's what it is. I'm wanting to chronicle that shift so that anyone else who wants to leave a position of wage slavery or slavery of any kind can say, well, if that crazy old white cracker can do it, certainly I can do it. And if she can teach me something that I can do it too, then all right, maybe I'll listen to her crazy stories for a while and see if I can get some bits and pieces of her magic for me in my world and making so that I get my own thing that I want, whether it's a castle or a hobbit house or Howl's Moving Castle. No matter what the size and shape of that thing is that I want, I can get what I want. And so that's the end goal of all these crazy and bizarre type ramblings. But yeah, until next time, until the next chapter, there it is. I hope you enjoyed it, and there will be more coming. So stick around, why don't you? It's definitely a long, strange trip. Until next time, take care of you folks. I sure am trying to take care of me. Bye-bye.